to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. We are here. It is Friday. Made it through the week. Those of you expecting to hear the Flash review, please understand that the Flash airs on Wednesday, live. I don't watch it live. I watch it the next day on the CW app. Yesterday, DMZ came out, so I started plowing through that instead, because DMZ is a new series that I want to try and get through. I'm going to break this up into 4 parts, because there are 4 episodes, and I feel that it is unfair to try and do, all 4, episode, do all 4 in one half-hour episode. Doesn't feel right, so we're going to break it up. We're going to do part. So, part 1 of DMZ. That was the first part I watched, obviously, as one would expect, watching things in this newfangled thing called chronological order. And here's the thing. I am pre-sold. I am someone who loves comics. I love what they did over at Vertigo. This was kind of the replacement for Y the Last Man after Y the Last Man ended as a comic, where it was like, take America, make it dystopian and militaristic, and have some great calamity befall it. And there are definitely some similarities to Y the Last Man. Here is where my problem with this show comes in. If you are not pre-sold, you're gonna there is a barrier to entry. And a lot of the barriers to entry are things like, how does this world work? Like, if you think about the Hunger Games, this is the example I was texting with someone last night. Like, if we use the Hunger Games as the example of like a dystopian future and militaristic and all of that, and you look at the Hunger Games, there is no barrier to entry on the Hunger Games. Like, if I'm watching that, I can go in blind, and it's like, all you need to know is that there was a great revolution, or something happened almost a century earlier, and now they do the Hunger Games every year as a punishment to the districts who are in rebellion, and then they do, and then because of that, they have to put, one boy, one girl from each district up, and then they gotta see who's going to, they gotta fight to the death. And that's it. You don't need to know the nuance of the war or what led up to it. That's all, garnish in the books and in the prequel, but it's not necessary to understand and enjoy the book you are reading. DMZ is a little bit more political and a little bit more intricate. Like, the Free States of America and it rebelled against the United States of America in the Second Civil War. This is not easily explained over the course of this. I think Free States is mentioned once, and really that's it. Like, they mentioned the Free States as one thing, and all of that, and it's designed to be a product of its era. This came out in 2006, and it's a story that is based in militia groups in the mid 2000s and all of that, and the idea that this would translate well in this era is laughable. To say that this world is one that will be reflective of American society in a way that's not, easy to dismiss, it's silly, and especially in a world after last January, this just doesn't sit right with me. And then on top of it, when you take that into consideration, in order to establish what's going on, it's like, okay, so Benjamin Bratt's character is trying to become governor of the demilitarized zone, which is Manhattan, so that way they can become their own independent state. And we have to take this without the comic book, because that's the thing, and I think one of the things that I bring up fairly often is that if you're going to do a TV show or a book based on a movie, or a comic, based on a comic book or a video game or anything like that, there should be no quote-unquote required reading for me going into it as a viewer. I should be able to pick this up, go on HBOMax, see it's there, and watch it without having to sit here and be like, okay, I have to read the comic to understand this, especially when the comic went for 80-something issues. I think maybe it was 103, maybe I've been checking up with something else. But it went for at least 70 issues. And it's a long comic. And to sit here and be like, okay, well, you need to read the comic to understand it, that's a barrier to entry that shouldn't be there if we're going to make something for television. So, all that notwithstanding, all that notwithstanding, when we go through everything that happens in this book, in this show, there is no moment where it's explained to you why Manhattan was declared a demilitarized zone. There's no moment, and that's a pretty fundamental part of the story, especially if we're going to talk about why they want to get independence and all of that. What was it about Manhattan that was that neither side really wanted it, and they're like, fuck it, we're just going to leave it and declare it a demilitarized zone? Was it some kind of conflict that led to tons of civilian casualties? What happened that led to that? That's an important part of the story. And the movie, the show, the miniseries, does not seem committed to telling you that. And it's just kind of, silly to me that it's that's what people are doing. That when you watch it, that's not explained in a way that is, I'm going to say acceptable, but narratively coherent, because that's an important part of the story, is what happened to get us from point A to point B. They don't ever explain that. And I get it, they're more committed to showing us Rosario Dawson trying to find her son, but at the same time, it's why is this, there's an important part missing. And without that important part, it's hard to, commit, there's always suspension of disbelief that needs to be done when you're watching science fiction, but it's the idea that, it would immediately fall into 5 factions after, and that's the thing, we don't know how long it's been. They're kind of nebulous about that, how long it's been since the invasion that went poorly, that led to the demilitarized zone. But, come the fuck on. You mean to tell me that, within, immediately it's gonna fall into dystopian kind of 5 tribes of fucking, 5 tribes of Manhattan? It becomes Gangs in New York almost immediately. But, at the same time, I feel like in Gangs in New York, if Manhattan Island was suddenly abandoned by everyone and no one was helping them out, they would have put aside their differences for a little bit to get infrastructure up and running again. Or at least set up clear, okay, we're not going to cross this line, you do you over there, we'll do what we want to do over here. That kind of thing, I feel would definitely happen. I think that's kind of the problem with dystopian stuff. I mean, and again, in the era we do, living in the era we do, to say that, it's unlikely people would help out. Seeing what we've seen in the last few years, it appears that people wouldn't help out when doing the bare minimum to help out, would slightly inconvenience them, but I still have some slight optimism, maybe misguided optimism. And then on top of it, it's okay, so the demilitarized zone is this area where there's a ceasefire between the free states and the United States, and I don't know. You mean to tell me that there wouldn't be an international power who's we're going to step in to help the United States quell a bunch of militiamen who have taken over? Come the fuck on. That's the problem with a lot of this dystopian stuff, is that because the United States has the situation it does, every world, a United States civil war I think would very quickly become a world war. Because of the amount of, the economy and not just that, but also the weapons power of the United States. If it fell into the wrong hands, that would not be something that's good for the rest of the world. So for the rest of the world to kind of just turn a blind eye, that's just kind of silly to me. And it's just kind of we're going to set up this, and the thing is, too, is, for some reason, in a comic, I'm more alright, that works to an extent. But, because it's a TV show, now I'm alright, well, why is this why are we just allowing this and being okay with this? And quite honestly, it just doesn't make sense to me that, it's just kind of silly, if I'm being completely honest. It's just kind of silly that we're so all of the United States is in a civil war and the front is there. So you mean to tell me that that's where, they got from Montana, although, and again, this is just because I've read the comic and I know kind of the beats of the comic, where it's okay, so it's militiamen from Montana, they got from Montana to New York, and then that's where the offensive kind of stopped. And it's well, what happened? How did the United States push them back? It's just kind of and then why did they stop and just be alright, well, we're just gonna let Manhattan go to shit and hope for the best? It's just silly. You get some cool visuals of the war as it's happening in Manhattan. It's one very quick shot. And then there are things where it's it's a demilitarized zone where they don't want people, she says at one point, I've been in and out of 2 countries trying to find my son, and it's well, what the fuck's the point of the security then? The security's incompetent, and then we see security try and catch her, and it's they're chasing her down a subway tunnel, which the subway tunnel is a secret way into and out of Manhattan, but it's not a subway tunnel that's a subway that no one's used in a long time. It's the 7, and it's oh, okay, so I guess that's just how people are going to go in and out. It's they're going to go in and out through the subways. That doesn't mean it's well mapped or anything, where there's fucking maps all over the planet, in every fucking train, where it's alright, so we know that they're going here, so we know people can get in and out through this. So, it's just so silly to me that it's it just, I don't know why it feels silly to me, but it's come on. How the fuck does that happen? So, Rosario Dawson is now in the demilitarized zone, 1/4 of the way through. She is now in there. And here's the thing, too. This feels like a TV pilot, not the first episode of a 4-episode miniseries. And there's a difference. A TV pilot is going to be designed to set up all the characters, set up all the relationships, and kind of keep going for an indeterminate amount of time. That's what this feels like. Especially the moment at the end of the episode when she gets, when she escapes the worst shots in the entire fucking, military, I would assume. Who are chasing her down in the tunnel and shooting at her with a machine gun, and they can't hit her, and it's what the fuck? At least be hey, we can't shoot in the tunnel because it may cause something to happen, or if you can't come up with some contrivance like that, be oh, it'll break the neutrality agreement, and we can't shoot in the tunnel. Okay, do that, but having them chase her down the tunnel and shoot blindly at her and kind of just hope they catch her doesn't make them look great. It makes them look very incompetent. It's oh, well, what? How? It's not like she can, run in a lot of different places. It's a tunnel. It's a fucking subway tunnel, no less. It's not a wide tunnel. And they're shooting, up at the ceiling, and they're, what the fuck? It's just kind of incompetence is what it is, and it's just kind of silly. I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, the show's kind of going to meander, and now we got 3 hours left of the show after part 1. Part 2 is going to go into some bigger kind of topics, I think. Hopefully part 2 starts getting into this a little bit more, because it is a miniseries, and they said it's a miniseries, so it's not going to come back for a season 2. They can't count on a season 2 return. But come the fuck on. Like, you mean to tell me that, like, you've been working on this show for 2 fucking years, and you can't, and this is what happens? Because this show started shooting in 2020. Before the pandemic, they were shooting the pilot. And you mean to tell me this is what you come up with after 2 years of development? Like, what the fuck? And the idea that, like, Warner Brothers didn't have confidence in the show, so they had to wait until a pilot was shown, that's kind of part of a problem here. That isn't being addressed, where it's like, we have to watch we're making a 4-episode miniseries, can you make us a pilot first? What the fuck? It's a 4-episode miniseries. Why do you need a pilot for that? And maybe that's why this episode feels so weird, is that it's designed to be a pilot to sell a show. And it's like, okay, well, great. You only have 4 hours to tell your story, and you spent the first hour as a pitch to executives. And then on top of it, it's like, okay, so they pick it up. Why not reshoot the pilot then? To make it a little bit more narratively cohesive, and maybe, maybe do part 1 as just one long, like, okay, here's what happened on evacuation day. I don't know. It just kind of feels silly to me. And it's like, now she's teaming up with this kid, and she's, I don't know. I just feel kind of silly about this whole situation. And that's the thing, too. It's like, it's a demilitarized zone, but, it's still war-torn because there's no one there to do it. It feels, and I know it's Ava DuVernay who did it, but it feels very, like, I don't want to say racist, but, like, to me it feels like it's reading where it's like, so all the people in charge left, and we left all the poor people by themselves, and there's really very few white people on this show, which is not a problem until you start thinking about the undertones that come with that, where it's like, oh, so there's no white people here, all the white people left, and the city has gone to shit. Like, it's kind of a weird, like, messaging situation, if you ask me, where it's like, what, you mean to tell me they couldn't come together and form a government? It has to go right to fucking warlords? Like, come the fuck on. It's just kind of silly to me, and with all things being what they are right now, it doesn't bode well for the show going forward, and it doesn't feel right given the current political climate, both domestically and internationally. It just kind of feels like a weird, like, I realize they spent a lot of money on this show. They couldn't just can it and sit on it forever. They did eventually have to release it. I totally and completely get that. At the same time, there is, that it is kind of just, there is a line. There is a line where I'm like, why does this have to be the way that this is? Like, I'm sorry. It doesn't have to. It's just kind of silly to me. So yeah. So we will wrap up there for today. We'll be back with part 2 tomorrow, then part 3 on Sunday, and then part 4 on Monday, or I'll consolidate part 2 and part 3. But yeah, I think that, like, the ultimate problem this show has is that there's no, like, oh, I want to keep watching right now. Like, Peacemaker, I wanted to keep watching immediately. I was like, okay, cool, Peacemaker is awesome, I want to keep watching this, week in and week out, and I want to watch it. And it's like, like, it doesn't have the brand loyalty that I had to Star Wars, where I was like, okay, Book of Boba Fett may not be great, but I still have to watch this week in and week out because it's Star Wars, and if it's got the Star Wars logo on it, I will watch it. I'm an easy mark. I understand that, but whatever, I will do that. And I think that this show just kind of doesn't have that. Like, the point where I watched the first episode and I was like, I don't really want to keep going right now. Which is a failure of the show. It's a failing of the show to be like, and that's the thing too. It's not like other shows where it's like, oh, well, I'll just binge it. Like, I can binge it. It's bingeable. All 4 episodes are out right now. It's just kind of, not grabbing me. So we'll wrap up there for today. And we'll be back with more this weekend. So until then, have a great rest of your week.